It was a crisp October evening in Brookhaven, the kind of picturesque suburban town that looked like it belonged on the cover of a lifestyle magazine. By 11:47 p.m., most of the neighborhood was asleep, save for the occasional hum of a car passing down the street. Inside my house, the air was still and silent, until it wasn't. I woke up parched, my throat dry as sandpaper. David wasn't beside me, which wasn't entirely unusual. He often stayed up late working in his office. But as I shuffled out of bed and headed toward the kitchen, I noticed the office light was off, the door slightly ajar. That's when I heard it. Laughter. Not the canned laughter of a sitcom, but soft, intimate laughter. A woman's laughter. At first, I thought I must be imagining it. But as I moved closer to the stairs, I recognized the voice. It was Maria. A sharp chill raced down my spine. Maria, our housekeeper, was supposed to have left hours ago. She had a key for emergencies, but what could possibly be so urgent at this time of night? And why was David laughing with her? Curiosity outweighed the unease in my chest. I crept to the top of the staircase, careful not to let the old wood creak beneath my weight. My pulse quickened as I strained to make out their words, the sound of their voices carrying softly but clearly through the house. "You're making this so much harder than it needs to be," Maria teased, her tone light but tinged with something darker. David chuckled, and I could hear the smile in his voice. "You're irresistible. You know that?" My breath caught in my throat. I moved down the stairs, my slippers muffling my steps. When I reached the bottom, I stopped dead in my tracks. Through the half-open kitchen door, I saw them. Maria leaned against the counter, her dark hair cascading over her shoulder. She was wearing a loose sweater and jeans, casual but effortlessly perfect, like someone from a glossy catalog. Her fingers trailed lazily over David's forearm, as if she'd done it 100 times before. And David, my husband of 15 years, the father of my 2 boys, stood there looking at her with a softness I hadn't seen in years. It was a moment so intimate it felt like I was intruding on something sacred, and it destroyed me. I pushed the door open, and the sound made them both jump. Maria snatched her hand away as though my gaze had burned her. David spun around, his face pale. "Am I interrupting something?" I said, my voice sharper than I intended. Maria's lips parted as if she wanted to speak, but no words came out. Instead, she fumbled with her purse, muttering something about leaving the key behind. She brushed past me, her perfume leaving a sickly sweet trail in her wake, and disappeared out the front door. I turned to David, who looked like a deer caught in headlights. His mouth opened, but nothing came out. "Don't even try," I said, cutting him off before he could begin. "Sarah, it's not what it looks like," he finally managed, his voice trembling. "Really? Then by all means, explain what it is." I shot back, my voice icy. David ran a hand through his hair, the perfect facade of the calm, composed husband finally cracking. "It's complicated," he said, and the words only fueled my anger. I didn't wait for an explanation. I turned and walked away, my heart hammering so loudly it drowned out whatever excuse he tried to throw at me. By 2 a.m., I was sitting in my car in the parking lot of a nearby motel. The small overnight bag in the passenger seat held only the essentials, packed in a blind fury. I hadn't cried, not yet. Shock, anger, and something I couldn't quite name were swirling inside me like a storm. I tried to piece together the moments leading up to this, the subtle clues I'd ignored. The nights he'd stayed out later than usual, the sudden uptick in Maria's hours, and the way she'd always seemed to linger in conversations with him, her laughter just a little too enthusiastic. But no amount of mental gymnastics could prepare me for what I found the next morning. I'd barely slept, and when I got back to the house to grab some clothes, I noticed something odd. Maria's car was parked 2 blocks away, in front of a neighbor's house. Curious, I slipped into the side yard, using the hedges for cover. What I saw through the kitchen window made my stomach churn. Maria was back, sitting at the kitchen table with David, a laptop open between them. They weren't arguing. They weren't panicking. They were smiling, their voices low but animated. It wasn't just an affair. It was something much bigger. I took out my phone and started recording, capturing the scene as Maria slid a thick folder across the table to David. His expression shifted into something cold, calculating, a side of him I'd never seen before. "She doesn't suspect anything," Maria said, her voice steady. "She's not as clueless as you think," David replied, his tone sharp. "We need to move faster." What did that mean? What were they talking about? My heart pounded as I backed away from the window, careful not to make a sound. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely unlock my car. Whatever this was, it wasn't just about me. It wasn't just about our marriage. Something far more sinister was unfolding, and I was at the center of it. The truth was, I hadn't just lost my husband that night. I'd lost the illusion of my entire life. And somehow, I knew this was just the beginning. I sat in my car in stunned silence, replaying the recording I just captured. Maria's voice, so steady, so assured, echoed in my ears. "She doesn't suspect anything." And David's reply, cold, detached, cut through me like a blade. What were they planning? What could possibly require the woman I'd trusted to keep my house in order and the man I'd built my life with to conspire against me in the dead of night? I didn't go back into the house that day. Instead, I drove to the closest cafe and parked myself in a corner booth with my laptop, determined to uncover the truth. My first instinct was to check our shared bank account. It was something I rarely looked at, trusting David to handle the finances. But as I scrolled through the transactions, unease settled in my stomach. There were charges I couldn't explain, frequent payments to a company I didn't recognize, Clearwater Consulting. The name meant nothing to me, but the sums were enormous. Thousands of dollars drained over the past 6 months. Panic crept in. What was Clearwater Consulting? And why was David funneling so much money to them? I did what any reasonable person would do. I Googled it. The results were sparse, but I found a single website. It was bare bones, with stock photos of smiling professionals and vague language about financial solutions. My gut told me this wasn't a legitimate business. I needed more. I needed someone who could dig deeper. That's when I remembered Jenna, my oldest friend and a forensic accountant. I hadn't spoken to her in a while. Life had gotten in the way. But if anyone could help, it was her. I called her immediately, and to my relief, she picked up. "Sarah? Wow, it's been ages. What's going on?" I hesitated, unsure how to start. "Jenna, I need a favor. A big one." Her tone shifted, concern replacing the casual warmth. "Are you okay?" "No," I admitted, my voice breaking. "I think David's hiding something. I don't know what, but it's bad." That was all it took. Jenna didn't ask questions or hesitate. "Send me whatever you've got," she said. "I'll look into it." 2 days later, Jenna called me back, and the news she delivered made my blood run cold. "Sarah, Clearwater Consulting is a shell company," she explained. "It's tied to offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands. The money David's been sending there isn't traceable, not directly, but it gets worse." "Worse?" I echoed, my stomach twisting. "Your name is listed on some of these accounts." I nearly dropped the phone. "What? That's impossible. I've never—" "I know," Jenna interrupted. "It means David forged your signature or added you without your knowledge. If this blows up, you could be implicated." Her words hit me like a freight train. Implicated. Fraud. Offshore accounts. This wasn't just about infidelity anymore. This was criminal. "Jenna," I whispered, my voice shaking. "What do I do?" "First, you need legal protection," she said firmly. "Find a lawyer, someone who specializes in white-collar crimes. Second, you need to confront David carefully. He can't know you're onto him yet. If he gets spooked, he could cover his tracks and leave you holding the bag." That night, I returned to the house with a plan. I was no longer the blind, trusting wife. I was a woman on a mission. David was sitting in the living room when I walked in, his laptop open on the coffee table. He looked up and smiled, a smile that now seemed so rehearsed, so hollow. "Hey, you're back late," he said, closing the laptop a little too quickly. "Yeah," I replied, forcing a casual tone. "I needed some space." He nodded, looking relieved. "I get it. Things have been tense." Tense? That was the understatement of the century. I sat across from him, pretending to scroll through my phone while stealing glances at his laptop. The screen was dark, but I could see faint traces of what he'd been working on. A spreadsheet. My heart raced. "Have you seen Maria?" I asked casually. David stiffened. "No. Why?" "She left in a hurry the other night. I thought maybe you'd spoken to her." He shook his head, his expression guarded. "No, I haven't." Liar. The rest of the evening passed in strained silence, and as soon as David went to bed, I snuck into his office. His laptop was locked, of course, but the drawer of his desk wasn't. Inside, I found something that made my heart stop, a burner phone. I flipped through the messages, my hands shaking. Most were from Maria, and they painted a disturbing picture. They weren't just stealing money, they were setting up an exit strategy. "Maria, we need to move fast. The account's almost ready." "David, relax. She doesn't suspect anything." But it was the most recent message that sent chills down my spine. "Maria, if she gets in the way, you know what to do." What to do? My mind raced with the implications. Were they planning to hurt me? I snapped photos of the messages with my phone, then carefully returned the burner to its hiding spot. My heart was pounding as I crept back to my room, every creak of the floorboards making me flinch. The next day, I met with a lawyer recommended by Jenna. Her name was Laura, and she didn't sugarcoat anything. "Sarah, you're in a dangerous position," she said bluntly. "If David and Maria have been using your name to move money, you could face serious consequences. But you've got one advantage: evidence." Laura reviewed everything I'd gathered, the bank records, the recording, the messages on the burner phone, and laid out a strategy. "We need to freeze the accounts and report this to the authorities. But it has to be timed perfectly. If they realize what we're doing, they could destroy evidence, or worse." "Worse?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Laura gave me a pointed look. "They've already shown they're willing to cross lines. You need to be prepared for anything." Prepared for anything. The words echoed in my mind as I drove home. My grip on the steering wheel so tight my knuckles turned white. Whatever David and Maria were planning, I wasn't just going to stop them. I was going to make them pay. But as I pulled into the driveway, I noticed something that made my blood run cold. Maria's car was parked out front. This time, I wasn't going to sit back and watch. I stepped out of the car and marched toward the house, ready for a confrontation. Little did I know, what I was about to discover inside would turn my world upside down once again. I didn't bother knocking as I entered the house. The door creaked open, and I stepped into the foyer, the sound of voices coming from the living room. Maria was here, and so was David. I could feel it in the air. The tension, the anticipation. This was it. Whatever they were planning, tonight it would unravel. I crept toward the living room, my footsteps soft on the hardwood floor. From my vantage point behind the doorway, I could see them sitting on the couch, their heads bent over a laptop. Maria was pointing at the screen, her voice low but urgent. "It's all there," she said. "Once the transfer is complete, we're in the clear." David nodded, his expression hard. "We can't leave anything behind. She can't find out." Too late. I stepped into the room, my heart pounding but my voice steady. "Find out what, David?" They both jumped, their heads snapping toward me. Maria's face went pale, and David's jaw clenched so tightly I thought it might shatter. "Sarah," he said, trying to muster his usual charm, "this isn't what it looks like." I crossed my arms, glaring at him. "Oh, please, spare me the cliches. I know everything about the money, the offshore accounts, and your little exit plan." Maria recovered quickly, her lips curling into a defiant smirk. "You have no idea what you're talking about." I pulled out my phone and hit play on the recording I'd taken earlier. Maria's voice filled the room. "If she gets in the way, you know what to do." Their reactions were priceless. David's face drained of color, and Maria's confidence faltered. For a moment, no one spoke. Then David stood, his hands raised as if trying to placate me. "Sarah," he began, his tone soothing, "you've got this all wrong." I laughed bitterly. "Wrong? You've been stealing from me, lying to me, And now you're conspiring to, what? Get rid of me? What exactly does you know what to do mean? David faltered, his mask of calm slipping. It's not like that, he stammered. Oh, it's exactly like that, I snapped. You were going to take everything and disappear, weren't you? Leave me to deal with the fallout while you two started your new life on some tropical beach. Maria rolled her eyes. You're so dramatic. Do you honestly think anyone will believe you? You have no proof. I smiled, pulling out the second phone, the burner I'd stolen from David's office earlier that day. You mean this? I'm sure the police will find it very enlightening. David lunged for the phone, but I was faster. I stepped back, holding it out of his reach. Don't even think about it, I warned. He froze, his hands clenching into fists at his sides. Sarah, let's talk about this. We can work something out. I scoffed. The time for talking is over, David. At that moment, the doorbell rang. Maria glanced toward the hallway, her composure slipping. Who is that? She hissed. My lawyer, I said coolly. And the police. David's eyes widened. You called the cops? What did you expect me to do? I shot back. Sit quietly while you ruined my life? The sound of heavy footsteps filled the house as two officers entered, followed by Laura, my lawyer. The officers wasted no time, moving to detain David and Maria. This is ridiculous, Maria shouted, struggling as they cuffed her. You have nothing on me. Actually, Laura said, stepping forward, we have plenty. Thanks to Sarah's evidence, we've traced the offshore accounts and linked them directly to you both. The emails, the transfers, it's all there. David didn't say a word as they led him away, his face a mask of defeat. Maria, on the other hand, screamed insults at me until the door closed behind her. For a moment, the house was silent again, the chaos of the last few hours finally subsiding. Laura placed a reassuring hand on my shoulder. It's over, Sarah. They're not going to get away with it. But as I sat down on the couch, my legs suddenly weak, I realized it wasn't just over. It was the beginning of something new. In the weeks that followed, the fallout from David and Maria's scheme was far-reaching. The media caught wind of the story, turning it into a suburban scandal that had everyone talking. David and Maria were charged with fraud and conspiracy, and while their trials were still pending, the evidence against them was overwhelming. For me, there was a strange mix of relief and sorrow. I'd lost my husband and the life I thought I knew, but I'd also gained something I hadn't felt in years: control. One sunny afternoon, as I sipped coffee on the porch of my new townhouse, Laura stopped by with some final paperwork. You did good, Sarah, she said, handing me the stack of documents. Most people would have crumbled under the pressure. I smiled faintly, gazing out at the quiet street. I didn't have a choice. When your life falls apart, you either rebuild or let it bury you. Laura nodded, then hesitated. There's one more thing, she said, pulling out a letter. This came for you at my office. I frowned, taking the envelope. It was from David, sent from jail. For a moment, I debated tossing it, but curiosity got the better of me. Inside was a single sheet of paper. The handwriting was rushed, almost frantic. Sarah, I never meant for it to go this far. I just wanted something different, something exciting, but I lost control. I know you'll never forgive me, and I don't deserve it. Just know that, in the end, it was always you. I'm sorry. I stared at the letter, a strange mix of anger and pity swirling inside me. David's apology came far too late. As I folded the letter and tucked it away, I felt a sense of closure I hadn't expected. The past was behind me, and for the first time in years, the future was mine to shape. And this time, I wouldn't let anyone take it away from me.